In chapter 13 of the book of Joshua, we actually enter a new stage in the book. If up till now the book recounted the entrance into the land and its conquest, now from chapter 13 till the end of chapter 19, a substantial number of chapters, the book recounts the allotment of the land, its parcelation and division amongst the different tribes. And this is brought in and of itself in different stages, where we also have the account of what was already inherited on the east side of the Jordan River in the time of Moses and the conquests in his time. We move on to the boundaries and slots of the major central tribes of Israel, namely Judah and the tribes of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh. And then the next stage is all the other smaller tribes and their allotment. And as we shall see, each section is characterized by a different description of how the allotment was done, at least in its description. So we'll begin with the opening of chapter 13. Now Joshua was old, advanced in years. This opening is actually quite reminiscent of the opening of Joshua 23. Beginning of Joshua 23, we also read, and Joshua was old and well stricken in years. In other words, the closure of the book, final two chapters, and the similarities, the description of Joshua's old age, both here in our chapter and towards the end of the book, has brought some scholars to the claim that the whole section of the allotment of the land and its division amongst the tribes was a later insertion into the book. It originally had the conclusion with Joshua's speeches in his old age, and here we have an insertion which also included the specification of Joshua being already advanced in years. In any event, it's clear that it's a different style, a lot more technical, this second section, primarily focusing on geographical divisions and notes. So this second stage in the book begins with Joshua's being advanced in years, and then the Lord speaking to him. And the Lord said to him, "You are old and advanced in years, and there remains yet very much land to be possessed." There's still a lot of land that has to be possessed, has to be allocated. This is the land that yet remains, all the borders of the Philistines and all of the Geshurites, from the Shihol, which is before Egypt, to the borders of Ekron northward, which is counted to the Canaanites, the five lords of the Philistines, the Gazites and the Ashdodites, the Ashkelonites, the Gittites and the Ekronites, also the Avim, from the south, all the land of the Canaanites, and Me'erah, that belongs to the Sidonians, to Aphek, to the borders of the Amorites, and the land of the Givlites, and all the Lebanon towards the sun rising from Baal Gad under Mount Hermon to the entering into Hamat, all the inhabitants of the hill country from Lebanon to Misrafot Maim, and all the Sidonians. I will drive them out before the children of Israel. Only divide it by lot to the Israelites for an inheritance, as I have commanded to you. So we have an opening, which is actually a command by God to divide the land by inheritance. But what's interesting is God opens the command with a description of the land that has not yet been conquered. So it's as if God is telling Joshua, even though conquest has not concluded, right, and there's still a lot to do, nevertheless, don't delay and let us continue now with the allotment of the land. And here we could already learn a lesson that sometimes, usually in life, things aren't perfected. The conquest wasn't perfected. There are still areas that weren't in total control of the Israelites. And even God says, nonetheless, go ahead and start parceling out the land amongst the different tribes, even if there still remains some land to be conquered. And that is what Joshua moves on to do. that brings us to the description. Now, before the actual allotment of the remaining land, as if to provide the complete picture, the book of Joshua also recounts the lands to the east, as I said, to the 2.5 tribes, Reuben, Gad, and the half of Manasseh that inherited in the east. And this is a theme that runs throughout the book of Joshua, constant relation to the 2.5 tribes on the other side of the Jordan River. And soon we'll relate to the importance, but here we can already see it after the command. And now divide the land for an inheritance to the 9 tribes and the half tribe of Manasseh, the 9.5. There's an immediate relation to the 2.5 tribes on the east with him. The Reubenites and the Gadites have received their inheritance, which Moses gave them beyond the Jordan eastward, even as Moses, a servant of the Lord, gave them. And then there's a description of that area to the east that was conquered. We don't have to get into all the details there. And in verse 14, there's also the pointing out that one tribe did not receive, only to the tribe of Levi he gave no inheritance. The sacrifices of the Lord God of Israel made by fire are his inheritance, as he said to him, right? Because tribe of Levi is directed towards the worship of God, the serving of God in the Mishkan, in the sanctuary, later in the temple. And therefore he doesn't have a land inheritance, but rather is spread out amongst the tribes and also focused in the worship in the sanctuary. So we read again, and Moses gave to the tribe of the children of Reuben inheritance according to their families, and there's specification, the continuation of the chapter of the areas that were inherited, and also the tribe of Gad and the areas that were given to them, and also inheritance of the half tribe of Manasseh. And like I said, this is a theme that runs throughout the book. We can find it, for example, also in the crossing of the Jordan, right? Where it's mentioned explicitly. Also, first of all, in the very beginning, right, of the book, we have the pointing out of the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half tribe of Manasseh, who speak to Joshua right in the beginning, right, and telling him, remembering the words that Moses said, right, and also as they cross the Jordan, right, in Joshua, it's chapter 4, after the mentioning of the rest of the people who are crossed, right, the ark of the Lord passed on, and the priest before the people, and the children of Reuben and the children of Gad and half the tribe of Manasseh passed on armed before the children of Israel, as Moses spoke, right? And as well, we see this in Joshua chapter 12 in the summary of the areas that were conquered. Once again, there was mentioned Moses, a servant of the Lord, and the children of Israel smote them, and Moses, a servant of the Lord, gave it for a possession unto the Reubenites and the Gadites and half tribe of Manasseh. So we see a constant kind of relation to the 2.5 tribes, even here, once again, even though it's not at all related, because now it's Joshua who's allocating the land on the west of the Jordan. There's importance of mentioning the east of the Jordan and the 2.5 tribes. And this is, of course, a central theme, I think, that runs throughout, the theme of unity. In other words, the book of Joshua constantly tries to present the unified aspect of all the people. And hence, perhaps for a book that puts such great emphasis on unity, the weakest link is emphasized. The 2.5 that are on the eastern side are always mentioned. And so too here, when the land borders are mentioned, once again, we see the mention of the 2.5 tribes, okay? And now, of course, the question is how the allocation is to be done, right? So we know that Moses gave the people the 2.5 tribes on the east, the lands that were conquered. But what about the rest? This whole area was conquered. How is it supposed to be divided? So we read in the beginning of chapter 14, And these are the cities which the children of Israel inherited in the land of Canaan, which Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun and the heads of the tribes of the children of Israel distributed for inheritance to them. By lot was their inheritance, as the Lord commanded through Moses for the 9 tribes and for the half tribe. So here we have explicit information about how it was done. It was done by lot, no elaboration on how the lot was performed, but we know that there was some kind of a lottery, a lot that was that determined the allocation. And of course, lotteries representing the will of God, which lands he wants to give to which tribes. What's interesting is the ordering here. Note that it's not Joshua who's mentioned first, but in the allocation, it states which Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun and the heads of the tribes of the children of Israel distributed for inheritance. Why the changing of the order? You'd expect Joshua, the central leader, to be mentioned first. I think this is, of course, to emphasize that the allotment is not by the whim of the leader, but rather represents the divine will, and hence Eleazar, the priest who represents, who's the representative of the divine here, is mentioned first as being central in the allotment of the land. And this is, of course, following the instructions that were given in the Torah itself. If we look, Numbers 26, right? Moses gave instructions, and the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, unto these the land shall be divided for an inheritance according to the number of names. To the more you shall give the more inheritance, and to the fewer you shall give the less inheritance. To each one according to those that were numbered, of it shall its inheritance be given. Notwithstanding, the land shall be divided by lot, according to the names of the tribes of their fathers, they shall inherit. According to the lot shall their inheritance be divided between the more and the fewer. So there's instructions here. Has to be given in consideration of the numbers. Does this relate to the numbers of the tribes or the families within the tribes? That's debated amongst the commentators, but we take into consideration the numbers of people. In other words, larger populations should receive larger lots of land, but this should be done by lot, right? In order that it's not to be viewed as something which involves special, interests and people, providing for those who are close to them. No, this is going to be determined by lot, so that it is clear that this is the divine will. This is also stated in Numbers 34. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, these are the names of the men that shall take possession of the land for you, Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun. And you shall take one prince of every tribe to take possession of the land, right? So we see also in the Torah the preemption of the priest, Eleazar, before Joshua, to show that it is to be done under the auspices of the high priest. So that is exactly what happens in the continuation of chapter 14, right? We have the heading of Eleazar the priest, Joshua the son of Nun, and the heads of the tribes, exactly as we find in the book of Numbers, and the fact that it was going to be given by lot. And again, note, we have the statement of the 2.5 tribes that Moses gave, and the fact that the Levites got no inheritance. And now we move on to verse 6. We begin with the tribe of Judah, and this amongst some scholars is evidence that the book was at least edited with a southern Judean perspective, remembering that later on the kingdom separated into two, right? The southern Judean kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, and the northern Israelite kingdom. So the focus on Judah being first has led some scholars to say that at least the later editing of the book was from a Judean perspective, a southern perspective. So before we can actually get to the description of the borders of Judah, we have an interesting, even moving event. In verse 6 we read, then the children of Judah came to Joshua in Gilgal, that's the campsite, as of now, and Kalev, or in English, Caleb, the son of Yefuneh the Kenizzite, said to him, "You know the thing that the Lord spoke to Moses, the man of God, concerning me and concerning you in Kadesh Barnea." He's reminding him of what happened. Now let's remember that Kalev was one of the 12 spies, right, sent with Joshua. And we remember that 10 of the spies said that there's no way they can conquer. And that is what led to the disgruntling of the people and their lack of faith in their capacity to enter the land and conquer it. And that is what delayed the conquest, right, for another 38 years till the end of the 40 years, and basically also till Moses passed away and Joshua took over. So there were only two spies out of the 12, right? Each spy representing a different tribe, that had confidence and believed that God would be able to give them the land. Those two were Joshua and Caleb. Now they meet again, right? 38 years later, or even more, because we also had the 7 years of conquest, right? So many years later, close to 45 years, they meet again. And now Caleb says, "You remember what Moses said concerning me and concerning you in Kadesh Barnea." Moses, right, the man of God. "I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord," notice the emphasis on everything related to the Lord, man of God, servant of the Lord, right, twice in different terms, "sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought him back word as it was in my heart." So, and I delivered the information as I believed, right? "And my brothers that went up with me made the heart of the people melt. But I fulfilled the will of the Lord my God." Right? So we see the contrast, right? I did as my heart, as in contrast to the other spies that made the hearts of the people melt. I fulfilled the will of the Lord my God. That's going to be a key term here, fulfilling the will of the Lord. "And Moses swore on that day, saying, surely the land upon which your foot has trodden shall be your inheritance and your children's forever, because you have fulfilled the will of the Lord my God." So he reminds them of the promise that Moses made, that land that you went to spy, you will receive as an inheritance. "And now behold, the Lord has kept me alive as he spoke these 45 years from the time the Lord spoke this word to Moses, while Israel walked in the wilderness. And now behold, I am this day 85 years old. I am still as strong this day as I was on the day that Moses sent me. As my strength was then, even so is my strength now for war, both to go out and to come in. And now, give me this mountain of which the Lord spoke on that day. For you heard on that day how the Anakim were there, the giants, and that the cities were big and fortified. It may be that the Lord will be with me, and I shall drive them out as the Lord spoke." So now there's a great irony. Caleb is asking to receive the land and get the opportunity to inherit it, to drive out and conquer the area of, as we shall see, Hebron, Kiryat Arba. And what does he emphasize? He emphasizes that he has the power today as he had in the past. In other words, he has that same confidence, and he wants to go to war to overcome those giants, the Anakim, and those massive fortified cities. Now, these two aspects, right, the Anakim and the fortified cities, these were the two aspects that caused the people to tremble and the other spies to believe that it's impossible to conquer. And here, ironically, Caleb is asking to be given the opportunity to make that conquest and to face up to that challenge of the Anakim and those big fortified cities. So we have here a a speech by Caleb, which is trying to bring Joshua to fulfill the earlier promises that were made to Caleb. And we can see the rhetorical power, right, in this speech, the different points that Caleb makes to convince Joshua. For one, right, emphasizing Moses as the servant of God and his oath. A second aspect is emphasizing how he was different from the other spies and how he fulfilled, right, the will of God. And this is spoken both by Caleb and also quoting Moses, right? Right. For you have fulfilled the will of the Lord my God. The same thing that Caleb said himself. I have fulfilled the will of my Lord my God. And he also quotes Moses as saying that, right? And interestingly enough, also emphasizing his strength today. He wants to say, don't think things have changed. I'm today like I was in the time of Moses. So don't think that due to age, I won't be able to make the conquest of the land that was promised, right? So Joshua hears this speech, and you can see the constant word vata, and now used, and now behold, right? And now give me this mountain, right? So the arguments lead to the following, right, request. Let's see Joshua's response in verse 13, and Joshua blessed him and gave Hebron to Caleb, the son of Yefuneh, for an inheritance. Hebron therefore became the inheritance of Caleb, son of Yefuneh, the Kenizzite, to this day, because he fulfilled the will of the Lord God of Israel. So here we have that third mention of fulfilling the will of the Lord God, Milah Acharei Hashem, right? This time by the narrator, right? Emphasizing that is why he's deserving to get Hebron. And the name of Hebron before was Kiryat Arba. Arba was the greatest man among the Anakim, and the land had rest from war. Okay, so we begin the allotment of the land to the tribe of Judah by an emphasis on Caleb, that spy who went with Joshua and was loyal to God, and therefore now wants to receive his reward as promised to him. After these digressions, if you will, both the 2.5 tribes in the east and the story of Caleb, we move on now in the following chapter 15 to a description of the boundaries of the tribe of Judah. Now, the specific chapter actually breaks up into 3 sections. We have first the boundary itself, the physical geographical boundary. Then we have another short anecdotal story related to Caleb, this time his daughter. And then finally, the rest of the chapter has a city list, right, within the area of Judea. So we have the boundaries, and a short anecdote, which we'll read, and then just a list of the different cities broken up into areas. So as far as the boundaries are concerned, it's a lengthy and technical description, right? We'll just point out a couple of interesting locations mentioned here in the boundaries. So, and the lot for the tribe of the children of Judah, according to their families, was to the border of Edom, to the wilderness of Tzin, southward, at the uttermost part of the south. And notice what's considered the southeastern border, and their south border was from the edge of the Salt Sea. This, of course, relates to what we call the Dead Sea, and it continues moving from there. And we have, let's say later on, we have the Malea Krabim, which is a place that is also known today, further inland. And if we move, let's say, to verse 5, we read, and the east border was the Salt Sea, even to the end of the Jordan. And the border in the north quarter was from the Bay of the Sea continuing onwards. And then we have, for example, in verse 7, another location which we're familiar with, right? The border went up towards Tvir, valley of Ahor, and so northward facing Gilgal, that is before the ascent of Adumim, what we call today the city of Ma'ale Adumim, right? Here it is also in the Hebrew, Ma'ale Adumim, right? We'll emphasize it right here, Ma'ale Adumim, okay? So we see the Dead Sea. If we move on to the next verse, verse 8, and the border went up, and this is where we get into close to Jerusalem, the northern part. And the border went up by the valley of the son of Hinnom, Gay ben Hinnom, known. This is right before the old city, Gay ben Hinnom, to the south side of the Jebusite, the same as Jerusalem. And the border went up to the top of the mountain that lies before the valley of Hinnom westward, which is at the end of the valley of the giants. Now, this valley of the giants in Hebrew is called Emek Rephaim. Okay, Emek Rephaim is well known. It's a street in Jerusalem, right? Those who've visited Jerusalem are familiar. It's a popular tourist area in the German colony. A lot of good restaurants. So that's kind of the borderline, right up to the old city, close to the old city. That's the northern tip of the Judean border, where Jerusalem is actually within the tribe of Benjamin. So it reaches up to the old city. So we can see the contours of the border, the Dead Sea, up to the old city, different directions. We won't go into all the details. That's the contour of the tribes. And like we said, in verse 13, where they give, after concluding all the different directions also to the west, we move again to a short anecdote related to Caleb. And to Caleb, the son of Yephoneh, he gave a part among the children of Judah, according to the commandment of the Lord to Joshua, even the city of Arba, the father of the giants, which is Hebron. And Caleb drove out of there the three sons of the giants, Shishai and Achiman and Talmai, the children of the giant. And he went up from there to the inhabitants of Dvir, and the name of Dvir before was Kiryat Sefer. And Caleb said, he who smites Kiryat Sefer and takes it, to him will I give Achsa, my daughter, for a wife. And Othniel, the son of Kenaz, the brother of Caleb, took it, and he gave him Achsa, his daughter, for a wife. And it came to pass, as she came to him, that she persuaded him to ask of her father a field, and she leaned off the donkey. And Caleb said to her, what is wanting to you? So after Caleb gave Achsa to Othniel, his brother, conquered that city of Kiryat Sefer, she comes to her father, and the father asks, so what else do you want? And she said, give me sustenance, for you have given me an arid land. Give me also springs of water. She says, yeah, you've given me land, but there's no water in that land. I want some springs of water, which are not in that city. And Caleb hearkens to what she requests, and he gave her the upper springs and the lower springs and nether springs. So we have here a nice anecdote, and what we can note here is that it comes to explain how Caleb not only had, or the Kenizzites not only had Kiryat Arba Hebron, but they also had some water sources and the city of Kiryat Sefer, Dvir. But it also points out how women, even though we're in a patriarchal society where the land is basically on the names of the males, but we see that the woman had a part in determining boundaries. We see this here. We see this also in the time of Moses with the daughters of Tzlofchad, where the woman took action in trying to get what they thought they were deserving of. And so here too, just as in the time of Moses, Achsa manages to get also springs of water into her inheritance, or her husband's inheritance. And following this, we go to the list of the city names. Now, this is a lengthy section. It's broken up geographically into different domains, different geographical areas, 4 geographical areas. And it actually starts from, not surprisingly, the south. You can see verse 20, this is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Judah according to their families. And the uttermost cities of the tribe of the children of Judah towards the border of Edom southward. And then there's a list of the names. So the first area is in the south, right? Southward, the Hebrew, Negba, right? Towards the south. So we start from the south. We said there's a southerly perspective. So this would be in the Negev area, the south of Israel. What city would we expect to find in this list if we're talking about the south of Israel? Well, the biggest city in the south is Beersheba, and we see it is indeed one of the cities in the list of Judean cities in the south. And that brings us to the next geographical location in verse 33. After the list of all the cities in the south, we have a summary, all the cities, 29 with their villages, in the lowland. So in addition to the Negev area, the southern desert area, we have the lowlands, right? In Hebrew, it's called the Shfela. This is a second kind of geographical domain heading. And then we have a list of the names of places in the lowlands, Eshtaol, Vetzoah, right? Here in the English, Eshtaol and Soah. These are cities that we know in the Beit Shemesh area. We have a long list of cities found in the lowlands. So that lowlands is basically the westerly low mountains that come down. If we have the high Judean mountains, and then we have a lower lands, but it's still a hilly country. For those who are familiar with the Beit Shemesh area, right, a nice hiking area. So there's this is the area we're talking about. Some of these areas still have their names now, amongst them Eshtaol and Soah, that are in the vicinity of Beit Shemesh. So that's the second area of the lowlands. And we move on to verse 48 for the third area, and that is the mountain, Bahar. And in the mountain, right, Hebrew, Vahar, another heading as far as important cities in the mountain. So obviously, the one that we've already focused on, that is Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron, an important central city, could say even a capital city of Judea, is mentioned there. And then we move on to the final section that would be in verse 61. After a summary of the cities in the mountain, we have a new heading, in the wilderness. In Hebrew, Bamidbar. This is referring more to the Judean desert, Judean wilderness, Judean desert, not the Negev to the south, or rather to the east, facing towards the Jordan Valley. That includes, right, the city of Salt, and as well Ein Gedi, right, which is a wonderful site, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, and even some have visited, right? So we have a summary of the different cities in Judea, and this distinction between the border description, right, giving us the contours, and then all the actual cities within each area is different. According to scholars, it's probably emanates from different sources. There were different collections. Some were geographic and gave the contours. Some were just city lists. What time and where were they taken by the editor? We can't know for certain, but different suggestions have been made from the time of Solomon later on. But these are the cities, central cities, that are found within the boundaries of Judea. And then as a summary, we also have a statement about a certain city that was not totally, a certain area that was not totally controlled. As for the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, children of Judah could not drive them out, but the Jebusites dwelt with the children of Judah in Jerusalem to this day. So here's just a certain mark of a failure to drive out the Jebusites from the area of Jerusalem. So we began with the tribe of Judah, central tribe to the south. And then the next two chapters, we can say, 16 and 17, move to the next group of important tribes, the sons of Joseph. And as we recall, Joseph basically gets a double inheritance, two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. And for that reason, the number 12 is upheld, because even though the tribe of Levi doesn't receive any inheritance because they work in the sanctuary and spread out amongst the people with a religious mission, and therefore they don't get a physical inheritance of a land for their tribe. But the number 12 is upkept because Joseph has two sons. And that brings us to chapters 16 and 17. It's very interesting because this section opens up with a relation to the children of Joseph, without the distinction off the bat, but rather as a general branch, the children of Joseph, in the beginning of chapter 17, the first 4 verses. Then it moves on to delineate the geographic area inherited by Ephraim and Manasseh, each of them separately, and also including the city lists for each of their tribal allocations. And then finally, at the end, we shall see there's a return to relating to them as the children of Joseph, right, as a separate house, right? Here, if you will, the book of Joshua finds it important not only to relate to them as separate tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh, but rather the house of Joseph. And this, of course, continues the line that we find already in the Torah and the book of Genesis, where there are like two leaders. There's the tribe of Judah and Joseph. Judah and Joseph, those are the two leading sons of Jacob. And so too here we have them being presented as Joseph, right? Even though Joseph had two tribes. So the opening verses, we have the contours, the general contours of the area, and we're talking about a little further north of Jerusalem. The lot for the children of Joseph went out from the Jordan at Jericho to the water of Jericho to the east, to the wilderness that goes up from Jericho to the mountains to Bethel, right, which is north of Jerusalem, Luz, and other cities mentioned that are important, right? The border of lower Beit Horon and to Gezer, here we're more to the west, right? And the children, okay, and then we have a summary, and the children of Joseph, Manasseh and Ephraim took their inheritance. And now we begin with an elaboration of the area of Ephraim, and the border of the children of Ephraim, according to their families, was the border of their inheritance on the east side was a list of places, including Upper Beit Horon, etc., etc. We don't need to go into the whole list. Western from Tapuach, Kana, etc. And then we have, after the list of their area, and the separated cities for the children of Ephraim among the inheritance of the children of Israel, all the cities with their villages. Then there's in verse 10, there's a mention of the areas that they did not succeed to take control of. And they did not drive out the Canaanites that dwelt in Gezer, which is an important city to the west, in the lowlands already, and even close to the coastal plain. But the Canaanites dwelt among the Ephraimites to this day, and they became servants under tribute. Right, so they couldn't drive out the Canaanites from the area of Gezer, but they did give them tribute, taxes that they paid to Ephraim. So that's as far as Ephraim is concerned. The next chapter begins with Menashe and its contours and cities. And there was a lot for the tribe of Menashe, where he was firstborn of Joseph, etc. And we know that Menashe split up and got part to the east of Jordan as the half tribe, and also on the west. The rest of the children of Menashe, according to their families. We have just an elaboration of the places that they had. And after the list of the cities, land of Tapuach belonged to Menashe, but it bordered with Ephraim, etc. And after all the elaboration, we see an interesting story from verse 14. So afterwards, and the children of Masha could not drive. We have also the areas that they couldn't take control of, right? The area of Beit Shan, Menashe had in Issachar and in Asher, Beit Shan, right, area, and Dor, the Ein Dor, right, Megiddo, right? And the children of Menashe could not drive out the inhabitants of these cities, but the Canaanites were content to dwell in this land. And it came to pass when the children of Israel became strong that they put the Canaanites to tribute, but they did not drive them out. So we can see that there's certain areas, especially in the valleys, where the Canaanites continued to dwell. And then we have a fascinating anecdotal story. And the children of Joseph, once again, we move back to the children of Joseph, not that distinction between Ephraim and Menashe, but as a group. And the children of Joseph spoke to Joshua, saying, "Why have you given me one lot and one portion for an inheritance, seeing I am a numerous people, for as much as the Lord has blessed me thus?" So basically, they start saying, why did I get so minimal a lot, one lot, which is, I'm a big tribe, I have a lot of people. They start complaining that they didn't get enough. Now, don't forget, this was done by lot and probably represented the divine will. So nevertheless, they're unhappy with what they received. There's always people who complain, right? Let's see how Joshua grapples with this complaint. Now, I just want to point out, Joshua is he's from the house of Joseph. He's from the tribe of Ephraim, so he's one of them. So how does he respond to this complaint? And Joshua said to them, "If you are a numerous people, then go up to the forest and cut down for yourself there in the land of the Perizzites and of the giants, if Mount Ephraim is too confined for you." So he basically says, if you are limited, you don't have enough area to dwell, so go and try to cut down the forested area, so you'll have more area to dwell in. So he basically says, oh, there's more land available, you just have to make it inhabitable, and that requires work, but you have a lot of people, so get to work, right? Forest convention, conservationists wouldn't be too happy about this, right? Nowadays, there are indeed no forests in that area. But once that area was apparently quite forested, we see it also in different places in the Bible. And so Joshua says, listen, if you need more cultivating land, cut down the forests. All right, how do they respond? And the children of Joseph said, the hill is not enough for us. It's just not enough, that area, even if we cut down the forest. And all the Canaanites that dwell in the land of the valley have chariots of iron. They who are of Beit Shan and her towns, and they who are of the valley of Jezreel, what we read earlier, the areas that were not conquered, Megiddo, Beit Shan, right? They have heavy weaponry. They have chariots of iron. So how are we to do? We don't have enough land, and we can't conquer the lowlands of the valley. So they don't give up. They have a complaint, and they say we don't have enough area to dwell in. Joshua responds again in verse 17. Joshua spoke to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim and to Menashe, saying, "You are a numerous people and have great power. You shall not have one lot, but the mountain shall be yours, for it is a forest, and you shall cut it down, and its outgoings shall be yours. for you shall drive out the Canaanite, though he has iron chariots, and though he is strong. So basically, Joshua kind of responds to them and uses their words against them. They open by saying, we are many, we're a numerous people, right? And we only have one lot of land, right? So we need more. So Joshua says, indeed, you're a numerous people. That means you're strong. You have a lot of strength. And hence, therefore, you use that power that you have of being numerous, right? And what should you do? You have great power. And therefore, go and clear out some of the forests so you have more land, and also clear out the Canaanites. Don't be afraid of them, and go ahead and overcome them. So we can see that even though Joshua is from their tribe, he doesn't heed their complaints, and he says, no, it's within your power to overcome, all right, and to find a settlement which will be sufficient for you. You just have to use your power, right, whether it be to overcome natural difficulties, hurdles, or whether it be enemy hurdles, human challenges of the Canaanites. You can overcome both of them, and you will not be left with one lot, but rather you will also control the mountains, and you will also control the valleys. So that's in relation to that whole section of chapters 16 and 17, treating the inheritance of the house of Joseph, namely the two tribes, Ephraim and Menashe. Ephraim being a leading tribe already now with Joshua, but also later on in the kingdom of Israel. And this is the first this section of the allocation to the west, basically concluding with the three big tribes, Judah to the south, and then Ephraim and Menashe, a little more to the north of Judah. And this brings us to chapter 19. We'll just summarize. So chapter 18. We'll see that just like with Judah, Jerusalem was still not in total control of their Jebusites. So too in the Samaria area, there are areas that are still inhabited by Canaanites. So in other words, the book counts for partial failures. And like we said in the opening speech of God, even though there are certain areas that weren't as yet totally conquered and controlled by Israel, and the enemy has not been driven out, the allocation moves on. We don't wait for perfection. And when the time calls for it, then the area is allocated. And what's left for the future, Joshua was very optimistic that that will be accomplished as time progresses. Okay, this brings us to chapters 18 and 19. Chapters 18 and 19 treat the borders of the remaining tribes. So we've already done 3 tribes. And that leaves us, and we have 2.5 tribes to the east, right? So that means 5 have been taken care of, but it leaves 7 that we still don't know their boundaries. And we're talking about tribes that are primarily, most of them to the north, one of them also to the south, that are left for the end and are treated separately in chapters 18 and 19. So here we kind of open up a new unit, and we can see the opening in verse 1. And the entire congregation of the children of Israel assembled at Shiloh. This is a different area. Shiloh is in the mountains of Benjamin, not far from the Bethel area, Bethel. It's no longer in the Gilgal where previously the text took place, but rather already in the mountain area. So they congregate in Shiloh and set up the tent of meeting there. And the land was subdued before them. So here we see that the tent of meeting, which was constructed in the time of Moses, finds it was taken from the camp, from Gilgal, and now is found in Shiloh. And then we're informed. And there remained among the children of Israel 7 tribes who had not yet received their inheritance. And Joshua said, how long are you slack to come in to possess the land which the Lord God of your forefathers has given you? Appoint for yourselves 3 men for each tribe, and I will send them, and they shall arise and go through the land and describe it according to their inheritance, and they shall come to me. And they shall divide it into 7 parts. Judah shall remain in his border on the south, and the house of Joseph shall remain in their border on the north. You shall describe the land into 7 parts and bring it here to me, and I will cast lots for you here before the Lord our God. And again, the statement, for the Levites have no part among you, for the priesthood of the Lord is their inheritance, and Gad and Reuben and half of the tribe of Manasseh have taken their inheritance on the eastern side of the Jordan, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave them. So we see that framework of the 12 tribes being kept, and doing the math, here we have 7 left. So that's what's done. And the men arose and went, and Joshua charged those that went to describe the land, saying, go and walk through the land and describe it and return it to me, and I will cast lots for you here before the Lord in Shiloh. So their mission here, and this is very interesting, is to basically map out the land geographically, and then apparently Joshua is going to separate it into areas, locations, and there's going to be a lottery, and then each, based on the lottery, each tribe will receive one of the plots that were charted out amongst all those who were sent to determine a map of the area. And this is, of course, going to be done once again by lottery and before the Lord. So what's different here is, in contrast to the 3 large tribes, where the land was, the boundaries were described, but there wasn't a preliminary survey, right? A representative survey committee that was sent out to map it out. This is only done with the remaining 7 tribes, and hence we have a new kind of section here, beginning with the statement that this is going to be done in Shiloh with Joshua. We can see that it closes out in the end of chapter 19. If we can see the closure of chapter 19, these are the inheritance which Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun and the heads of the fathers of the tribes of the children of Israel divided for an inheritance by lot in Shiloh before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And they made an end of dividing the land. So we can see that this is a separate section that focuses on Shiloh. By the way, this verse at the end of chapter 19 closes not only this subsection of chapters 18 and 19, but the whole section of chapters 14, from chapters 14 and onwards, the whole description of the allocation of the land, but it plays kind of a double role. It also concludes the subsection of chapters 18 and 19 in relation to the 7 remaining smaller tribes. Now, as far as the remaining smaller tribes, like we said, their allocation was different. It was by a mapping out of the land. So basically, we had the eastern tribes that were allocated by Moses by conquest earlier on. Then in the time of Joshua, we have the 3 big tribes whose land borders were allocated by lot, but apparently were done at an earlier stage. Reason probably being is that area was first conquered. In other words, the conquest came in from Jericho and conquered those areas in the heartland, basically Judea and Ephraim. If we remember the cities, they conquered Jericho, the Ai, and then the southern campaign with the king of Jerusalem and the king of Hebron and other cities to the south. So maybe those areas were conquered earlier and were already allocated to the larger tribes. Then the remaining mostly northerly area was only later taken into control by the Israelites, and hence it was charted out and divided, if you will, at a secondary stage. Okay, and that is what's done here in chapters 18 and 19. So as far as the ordering of the remaining tribes, So the first tribe that is described is the tribe of Benjamin. So once again here, this ordering, Benjamin probably emanates from his being a neighbor to Judea and between. He's actually located between Judea and Ephraim in the city of Jerusalem. So as a close neighbor of Judea, if it's a southern Judean perspective, we're not surprised to find Benjamin first amongst the list. And after Benjamin, we have the next tribe will be the tribe of Shimon. Now, Shimon is very interesting because it's the next chapter, and we'll just see chapter 19. Shimon is actually, in English, Simeon, is actually a southern tribe. I'll share with you a map so you can see how it works. Okay, here we can see Judah. Now take a look. Benjamin is to the north between Ephraim and Manasseh. See the Manasseh on both sides on the east and west of the Jordan. And here's Reuben and Gad to the east. Now on the west we have Judah we began with, and we did Ephraim and Manasseh on the west. And then we went to Benjamin, the northern neighbor of Judah. And then we went to Shimon, southern kind of engulfed tribe within the tribe of Judah itself. So we know from the book of Judges that they kind of intermingled and assimilated. The tribe of Shimon assimilated into the larger tribe of Judah, and they worked together in their conquests. Okay, so we had Benjamin and Shimon, and then after Shimon and the lists of the cities that they had in the south, we continue to additional tribes in the north. Zvulun. Zvulun is, we'll soon see it on the map, his location is followed by Issachar, and then Asher, Naphtali, and Dan. That's the ordering, Zvulun. And afterwards, we move on to Issachar in verse 17. And then after Issachar, we move to Asher. And then we go further. That takes us further north, right? And then this is Asher, and then we have Naphtali in verse 32. And then the final tribe is, after Naphtali, Dan, which we find in verse 40, tribe of Dan. Let me give you a little perspective, geographic perspective of the tribes here. So we said the tribes we had after taking care of Benjamin and Shimon, then we have Issachar, Zvulun, Naphtali, and Asher. You see to the north. Asher also stretching into Lebanon, right? Sor and Sidon are mentioned as part of their borders. In other words, Lebanon was clearly part of ancient Israelite borders according to the book of Joshua. That's within the areas of Asher. We can see those cities in the list of the cities of the tribe of Asher, right? We see it goes into Carmel and Sidon. Here's Sidon, which is Tyre, right? Etc. The area of Achziv. Okay. And this brings us, like we said at the very end, to the tribe of Dan. Now, the tribe of Dan is interesting because it actually had two areas in which it settled. It first settled in basically what we can say is the Tel Aviv metropolis area, around the Bar Ilan area. Bar Ilan was probably in the area of Dan. And we can see in the list of their cities, some of these cities so we can recognize today. Some of them are in the Beit Shemesh area, bordering with Judea, like we mentioned, Soa and Eshtaol was our border towns between Dan and Yehuda. Ir Shemesh, according to some scholars, refers to what is Beit Shemesh today. Other names that you might recognize, Shalabim, Ayalon, it's the name of the highway, Ekron, etc. We move closer to our area, around the Bar Ilan area as well. Yehud, Bnei Brak, Gat Rimon, and we also get to Mei Yarkon. Yarkon is a river that flows into northern Tel Aviv, into the sea, from the area of further inland, and around through Petach Tikva and further east, and then we go all the way with the border till Joppa, which is of course Yafo, not mentioned often, but here this is Tel Aviv Yafo. That was part of the Dan area. By the way, nowadays this whole area is called Dan, and the bus company that runs all the buses in this area is the Dan Bus Company, right? And the whole area is called Gush Dan, the Dan area, right? So that was the area of the last tribe, the tribe of Dan. And then apparently they had some difficulties and limitations in this area. So they decided to branch out, and they went up north, far to the north. And they fought against, here it's called Leshem. They took it and they conquered and settled down there as well in the north. Perhaps it'll appear also in the map. You can see Dan here, well up in the north, close to this is the Hermon area, right? So they were able to, the sources of the Jordan River, they were able to conquer. And therefore they had both this area, the Gush Dan area down here, Yafo, which is Tel Aviv Yafo, and then they branch out further in the north and conquer there as well. As far as the ordering of the tribes here, so we can see a general movement from south to north, we said. There are also maybe a logic based on the status of the tribes, which already emanates from the book of Genesis, where Jacob, who had 4 wives, so there were 2 actual wives and 2 concubines. 2 wives were Rachel and Leah. So Rachel gave birth to Joseph and Benjamin, and of course Joseph had 2 sons, Ephraim and Menashe. So those are the sons of Rachel, Rachel, and we had the sons of Leah, amongst them, of course, Reuven, as well as Shimon and Judah. And then we had the concubines. Rachel had Bilhah and Leah had Zilpah. And if we look at the ordering here, so the remaining 7 tribes, so we had Benjamin, Shimon, Zvulun, Issachar. So we start off with the sons of the wives, and then we move on, Asher, Naphtali, and Dan, who were the sons of the concubines. So that could also, the ordering of the could also be geographic, and also could also be related to the status of the different tribes vis-a-vis the original wives and concubines of Yaakov, of Jacob, in the book of Genesis. You can see that in Genesis chapter 30. So what we can see here is this is the description of the allotment of the whole area that was conquered, and the conclusion, once again, which we read, brings us and ties us to the beginning of the allotment process, as well as to the previous chapter in Shiloh. We have basically from chapters 13 till chapter 19 the allotment, And the summary, these are the inheritance which Elazar the priest, once again first with the Elazar the priest, and Joshua the son of Nun. What's interesting is that right at the end, after the last tribe, Dan, receives his land, we have somebody else who still has to receive a parcel of land. Verse 49, and they made an end of dividing the land for inheritance by its borders. The children of Israel gave an inheritance to Joshua, the son of Nun, among them. According to the word of the Lord, they gave him the city which he asked, Timnat Serach, in Mount Ephraim, and he built the city and dwelt in it. Here it's called Timnat Serach. Other places it's called Timnat Cheres. It could be a flipping over, metastasis, a flipping over of the letters. In any event, Joshua receives the land after we had the description of the tribe of Dan, the last tribe, that also conquered part in the north. By the way, in the Greek version, the description of the conquest of Dan in the north is extended, probably based on the book of Judges. After all the tribes get their land, only then does it state that Joshua gets an inheritance for himself. The place, the town called Timnat Serach or Timnat Cheres, and he is given, now note, he gets that land, but who gives it to him? The people, right? And they made an end of dividing land for inheritance by its borders. The children of Israel gave an inheritance to Joshua, according to the word of the Lord. It's interesting that the people give the leader. It's not that the leader takes for himself, but it's given by the people to the leader, I guess, an appreciation of all that he had done. This is also by lot. And what's also interesting is that he's last. You can see the leadership of Joshua. He doesn't look out for himself, as commonly found amongst many leaders who use the people for their own benefit. Rather, Joshua looks out for the people, parcels out the land, allots the land to all the tribes, and only when he is finished with the allotment of the land does he then look out for himself and asks to receive an inheritance for himself as well, and for his family. And we see here, right, that aspect of his leadership, of his care and concern for the people before looking out for himself. So if the stories of the allotment begin with a special request by Caleb from the tribe of Judah, we conclude with Joshua, and once again we can see that kind of structure that brings us back to those two spies who were faithful and went after God. We have that frame structure, beginning with Caleb and concluding with Joshua in relation to the allocation of the land. So the land has, for the most part, been conquered, and the remaining parts still have to be conquered. And the land has been allotted, and this has concluded the second stage of the book of Joshua. There are still a couple of things necessary as far as the organization of the people. And of course, there's also one tribe that still hasn't been organized. That is, of course, the tribe of Levi. And that we will read on as we continue in our study of the book of Joshua.